First of all, to ADIFE organizers for having us. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about the future of food with you all. I'm going to kick us off with just who XPRIZE is, what we do, and this competition that we have around alternative meat, and then hand it over to Simon to talk about more of the regulatory landscape, the challenges of scaling up these new technologies. But first, to take a step back, XPRIZE is a nonprofit foundation. We're based in Los Angeles in the US. We've been around for about 30 years, and the main thing that we do is design and operate very large-scale technology competitions. Recently, we started working on food tech and water tech as well, and the first prize that we launched in food innovation is Feed the Next Billion, which I'm here today to talk about. Feed the Next Billion is a $15 million award prize going towards companies, teams that develop alternative meat that are indistinguishable from conventional products. If you've walked around today in this great event, you would have seen some plant-based burgers and kofta. And this is sort of what we're trying to do. I think what we see here is the early stage of the innovation. What we are trying to do at XPRIZE is push these companies to develop more technically challenging products. So what we are looking at is a structured, whole-cut chicken or fish. It's a big transition to go from ground products like chicken nuggets or ground beef, patties for burgers, to a structured product. You have to get the fibers correctly, the structure, the taste, the nutrition. That's another big gap. And current products like beef burgers, they're, to begin with, not the best food for you. They're not the healthiest option available. And you have to put so many ingredients in the plant-based product to get it to feel and taste like the conventional. So we're trying to get companies to really accelerate their production, to first get the structure right without compromising on taste, and also improve on the environmental footprint of what they're trying to develop, nutrition, as I mentioned. And of course, one of the big components is cost. The products available on the market today are a premium compared to conventional products, so we're really trying to see, as teams scale up and companies scale up production, if they can meet price parity with conventional products. I want to talk a bit about the technology involved in developing these products. Plant-based is the most common, familiar one. I think we might be more familiar with that. But there's also big promise in technology such as fermentation, so precision fermentation technology, using fungi and mushroom, and using that not as an ingredient in the food, but to kind of adapt it to not taste like a mushroom anymore, but more as a meat. And then the third really exciting technology that we are seeing is cellular agriculture. Cellular agriculture, if you're not familiar, is taking cells from the animal without any harm on the animal itself. So you take those cells, you put them in a bioreactor. So we're really seeing pharma technology enter into the food tech space. And then these cells grow in the bioreactor into a product like a beef fillet, or like a steak, a chicken fillet, or a fish product as well. So that's an overview of the technologies. In our prize, we launched in 2020, and we had a big testing event in Abu Dhabi last year, and we worked with Simon on some of the testing of these products. And we're now down to 6 teams, and we're looking at finals testing next year to select the winner of the prize that will get the $15 million. So with that, I want to kick it off to Simon to talk about post-prize. Once these teams have a prototype and they can demonstrate to us as a competition operator that it's doable, no compromise on nutrition, environment, and the price is there, how do they get to market, and especially in a region like the UAE and surrounding regions? So Simon, maybe we can talk about how we did approach semifinals testing and how to take it forward from there.
Thanks, Caroline, and thanks also to XPRIZE and to Abu Dhabi International Food Exhibition to host us in this seminar and this chat. As Caroline mentioned, I'm from Abu Dhabi Quality and Conformity Council. Hopefully, maybe some of you have visited our booth as well, that it's at the event, at the exhibition this week. We are a council of regulators in Abu Dhabi who work on behalf of Abu Dhabi government to develop quality infrastructure. So by quality infrastructure, we mean things like testing, certification, standards development, metrology, market surveillance, all the gambit of different quality infrastructure activities. QCC has a role in both enabling current existing infrastructure and also developing it where there's a gap as well. This brought us into working with XPRIZE and also Aspire, Abu Dhabi Technical Research Council, and the group who work with nearby us in Mazda on the XPRIZE competition. So initially we were working primarily with testing safety. So we have a very extensive food and beverage testing lab within QCC. In fact, most of this lab has come from the legacy labs of ADIFE or ADIFE at the time, Abu Dhabi Food Control Authority. So we have a lot of expertise and capability when it comes to testing foods and beverages. Of course, now we get onto the subject of novel foods. So a lot of these novel foods we talk about, as Caroline mentioned, biomass fermentation, precision fermentation of additives and ingredients, and cellular agriculture. A lot of these technologies have only become out of the lab in the last, let's say, even 5 years or less. I think that we can count on one hand still the number of products that are in the shelves that have been approved by regulators, that have gone through all the safety testing, all the toxicology testing, allergy identification, and approval by international bodies to be able to put on the shelf. So we had a very, let's say, challenging job to begin with. And the idea of hosting the semi-finals for this competition within Abu Dhabi is how do we identify that the products that are being tasted and tested by judges are safe when they're not even regulatory approved anywhere in the world at the moment. So we worked and we developed a safety protocol and requirements for testing to ensure the safety of the judges. Now XPRIZE and the competition moves on to its final stage. We're continuing to support both the competition and XPRIZE and the novel foods market in general to help them to see how we work within both international regulation and UAE, Abu Dhabi-based food safety regulation to promote this kind of industry, to show that UAE and Abu Dhabi has the capability to provide support for these different types of food production. And that, particularly from QCC perspective, we wanted to enable new technology and enable industry within Abu Dhabi as well. So a big part of that will be providing those quality infrastructure resources, support for standards development, support for conformity assessment as well. This is, I think, a good way to broach onto the discussion now in terms of the contestants in the XPRIZE competition and how they're looking at regulation internationally.
Yeah, so maybe that's a good segue to talk about what our competitors are doing in this regulatory landscape. It's very difficult to navigate. And I wanted to talk about maybe internationally and take it to what the UAE is doing. So in 2020, late in December 2020, Singapore came out as the first country to regulate cellular agriculture products and allow their sale for human consumption. And with that, they kind of pioneered the regulatory framework and published the regulatory framework that they put together to allow for importation of these samples, testing to ensure safety, and then put them on the shelf, so market analysis as well to make those available for consumers. A following year, in 2021, we saw the USDA and the FDA in the United States put together a joint committee to start learning more about what these novel foods entail, the ingredients involved, and also put together this task force that would look into regulating the sale of cell-based meat, and also looking at plant-based meat as well if they were using new and novel ingredients in the production.
I think also always good to make the point as well that the definition of novel foods between all these different organizations is primarily foods that have not been eat in great quantities or additives or products or processes for producing food that is unique, that hasn't been in existence before the start of these regulations, which is all around about 2020, 2021.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where the companies come in, because 2 minutes. Okay, the companies that we work with were also they're startups, they're very technical focused, but they don't have the expertise to navigate the regulatory landscape. So there's a lot of capacity building that goes into preparing them for these discussions with regulators. And the regulators are also trying to learn these products as well. So again, like worldwide, only Singapore and the US are kind of exploring these and were able to get to market. The US this year allowed the sale of cell-based or cellular agriculture products for only two companies. So it's very early stage, and it's a huge opportunity for the UAE to also develop the framework that would allow startups and companies to establish operations here and also sell to consumers as well.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that the international regulations as they stand, primarily, as you said, from the European Food Safety Authority, from US FDA, and from the Singapore Food Authority, are very, very similarly aligned, at least in terms of their principles. And food safety is food safety at the end of the day. It's not a new regulatory kind of mechanism. So the primary things that they're looking at is what are the inputs to producing this new novel food. This is where it becomes a little bit more difficult for some of the new processes, right? Because the way you make food is quite unique compared to then growing it in a field or growing some animals. So this is one of the primary focuses of all of the new development from a regulatory perspective, is how do we understand the risks involved in the processes and the inputs for the food. The middle part, in terms of food safety and the processing side of things, there's some unique processing techniques, but most of the time, the general principles that we all know from food safety of HACCP and ISO 22000, these kind of principles, good manufacturing process practice, these are all in place and should be adopted by the industry. I think the new acronym that they've come up with now is GCCP, which is good cellular culture practice, which is a new, let's say, manufacturing practice that has come in. And then finally, at the end point, when you have a food product or you have an additive, the way we test this compared to international standards or pharmacopoeia is still, once again, very standardized. Maybe some new toxicology studies on there as well. So that all of the international regulatory bodies are taking this approach to then look at these different aspects and set up a regulatory mechanism to be able to evaluate new novel foods, novel additives, novel processes as they come into play. This is, now if we look at locally in the UAE and also in the Gulf region, we have a Gulf Standards Organization, or Gulf Standards, and a UAE standard for novel foods, which follows all these practices and follows the guidelines and same approach as Europe and as US. This dictates that effectively if you have a novel food and it is approved by in the EU or in the US, then this is also approved within the UAE. And this is quite similar for a lot of food regulation, not just novel foods, and things like health claims, nutritional claims follow the same guidance as well. Now what we really need to do is that if we want to develop capability and actually enhance UAE and Abu Dhabi and the region as somewhere that can make these foods as well, we need to be able to evaluate new novel proteins, novel foods internally. We can easily say to these companies, okay, you make it in the UAE, then go to Europe and get the regulation done. But there's also a greater interest in these companies to work and develop their product within the UAE if they also have the ability to get the regulation done here as well. Especially if this is going to be their first market. If you want to market in the UAE, then you don't have to go to the other side of the world to get regulation to come back again.
And I think that, kind of to wrap this up, we've seen, we've done, as I mentioned, semifinals testing here in the UAE, here at ADNEC actually, and we partnered with ADNEC on this big scale event to do the taste testing for a limited number of people. but we've seen the consumer readiness and interest in plant-based and alternative meat here in the UAE. And I think that's the last hurdle in this journey for companies to make this happen, is to get consumers to really embrace this new product. So we're trying to really get the regulation on board and shift this from like a biotech, lab-grown meat, scary subject to a consumer-accepted, almost equivalent to the conventional product that we are all used to, and that's another opportunity I think that the UAE has to offer. So,
yeah. I think from a processing perspective, I think a lot of the general public are not aware of how much processing goes into a lot of the foods, and how many foods are really just a conglomerate of different processes rather than sort of made naturally in someone's kitchen. So for novel foods, there's not much difference here. And you said that it's moving actually foods more towards the way that pharma is made. And so this is from a safety perspective, there is no issues there as well. And as you said, from a consumer uptake, there's obviously a lot of challenges, a lot of work that needs to be done to make the food similar to what we are used to when it comes to traditional proteins or traditional foods. But at the same time, we have to, to work with the understanding that when we talk about food security as well, that this is a big issue for food security. There's a lot of talks at COP28 next week about this particular technology and this subject as well. And as I said, for me, we were discussing earlier, what's converted me this year in particular is some of the statistics they have in terms of how many calories of grain and food production is required to make traditional meat. And the one stat that really changed my mind is that it takes 8 calories worth of grain or crop to produce 1 calorie worth of chicken meat. And from an efficiency perspective, we are much cleverer than that. We can do much better than this. If we want to feed the next billion, as you say, for the XPRIZE, we need to be able to increase that efficiency and have the consumer acceptability as well with the taste.
And to wrap up, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring that future forward so we can start it today instead of in 10 years or 15 years.
Yeah, It's very rapid, this is the key. We're going from lab to pilot scale to industrial scale in a space of less than 10 years, which is going to be a big change, I think, as well. But it's not, I think we discussed, it's not just the case that you're going to have food now that is only made from these one processes. The first foods we will see will be a mixture of the different processes. Some from biofermentation, some from traditional plants like plant-based meat substitutes, some from cellulose as well, all mixed together into different new foods. So we will take that step.